Hello everyone. I'm going to go over some workflows we use while working in the shot context. Things like making lighting changes to a shot, where to save those, and how you should save those changes, adding atmosphere with fog, tweaking camera settings to adjust depth of field. So let's get started. Okay, so I have my shot open. My camera is working. Everything looks great. I'm missing my character, and that's because he is inside of this butter dish. So what I want to do is make sure he's visible by translating him up on top of this. So the way you would do this, and typically when you want to make changes like lighting changes or translation changes like set dressing or things like this, what you want to do is create a sublayer and store it in like a Delta folder. So if you do this, every change that you make will be stored in this layer. So if somebody wants to come in and make other changes, they can add their own deltas, and it won't override anything that you've done before. So you want to make this your authoring layer so that any translations or any changes that you make are getting stored in here. So right now, if I grab the toy Jensen and I lift him up on top of this dish, you can see that there's a delta stored for him. So now that translation is stored in that layer. I can save that, and now my change is made. So now if somebody wanted to come in and see what changes were made, they can just toggle this on and off, and then everything is non-destructive. Okay, so now let's just say that there was like a director change or something, like they wanted this shot to look moody and, I don't know, more so like a spotlight is on him, and you had to make lighting changes. So what I'm gonna do is go back into my scene assembly MJ layer, make sure that's the authoring layer so that every change that I make is on here. So now what I would do is deactivate this HDR, and actually let's just keep it on so I can just see what I'm doing at first. And I'm gonna go, lighting, create a rectangular light. I mean, you can choose, play with these and see whatever light you wanna use, but I generally like to use rectangular lights, as it doesn't cause too much noise, and it's pretty simple and straightforward to use. So let's just say I wanted the spotlight up there. I'm taking this off, so now you can see it's a little bit more moody. I'm gonna angle this, just go around here, make sure that's how I like it. You can play with the shaping as well, just to get something like a cone effect. You can focus on this or that, but let's just put that a little bit on Jensen, just make sure like he's having this moment. And I'll just name this, spotlight, just something so that you know what it is. Go back in my camera view. That's looking cool. Maybe I'll adjust it a little bit, make it a little brighter. That's too bright, but that looks cool. Make sure he's on the stage. So now you can see this is stored in here. I'm going to save my layer and then move on to the next phase. Okay, now let's introduce a little bit of atmosphere. We have our lighting looking cool. We have our camera still working. Everything's looking moody, but I think I want to add some atmosphere just to make it even more moody. So what we're going to do is go into our render settings, path tracing, and go down to path trace fog. First, what you want to do is enable these settings and then play with them. All these settings are pretty self-explanatory. Density controls like how dense the fog will be. The height is how far from the ground it's going to be. Fall off is like how much of a fall off you get from start to stop from where the atmosphere actually occurs. And color adjusts the color. Asymmetry, I think what it does is how much light is in front of the light or how much light is behind the light. So you'll see more of a bloom towards the source of the lighting in the fog. So let's start with that. So let's add a little bit more dent, and already off the bat it looks pretty cool to me. Let's do that. The height looks fine to me. We can make it a little softer. And now let's introduce a bit of colors too. A little bit of cyan, just to get it a little moody. Yeah, I think that looks okay. So you can see it's streaming from the source of your light, and it's looking pretty good. Okay, so now we have our lighting, we have our fog and atmosphere. Now let's just say we wanted to make some camera changes and make like the depth of field a little bit more drastic. So let's start with just checking how this camera's moving. Okay, let's say I want to actually have my focus to be on toy Jensen. Right now we don't have like a pick focal object at the moment, but it's going to be implemented soon. So sometimes my little trick, as I like to do, is set this f-stop to something really dramatic, and then that way I can really see where the focus is going to be. So as you can see, I'm just trying to line it up to Jensen right now. Okay. And then from here, what you can do is then just type in your f-stop and just whatever you feel is needed. Sometimes we do 4.8, or I want to make it dramatic, so let's do 2.8. Or sorry, 2.8. And there we go. Let's see this. Yeah, sweet. So now the focus is on him, and this is my little hack of adjusting depth of field. Okay, so our scene is looking great. Now we just need to render it. And how do we do that? We go to rendering tabs, and then from the rendering tab, we go down to movie capture. Movie capture is what we use to, you guessed it, render movies. So what we're gonna do is check our render settings. Right here, the movie type is sequence. The camera is set to current, so if I switch to perspective mode, it'll go to that, but we're gonna switch to our shot camera, and frame rate will be 24 frames per second. The capture range, you could do it in frames or you can do it in seconds, but we're going to do it in frames. So you can see our frame range starts from 1001 to 1200. So we're going to do that now. Set that up. This is only for like real-time settings if you wanted to buffer beforehand and warm up. We're not going to need that because we're going to do path trace settings, and we're going to switch that right here at the render preset to path trace. From here, we can also make sure our resolution is correct, 1920 by 1080. And then we're going to go down to our path trace samples per pixel. And this is just pretty much like how many samples you want it to render to resolve into a clean image, pretty much. So right now I'm using 1,000 samples, so I'm going to do 1,000 here. But excuse me, 1,000. So what happens if if you have something with a lot of motion blur, you probably want to crank up the subframes per frame. And this is pretty much just like how many frames are you calculating in between to make the motion blur smooth and not look like, I don't know, stepped. So, and keep in mind that this number is multiplied by this number. So total, we will have 5,000 samples right now. So that's not what we want. So just keep that in mind when you're adjusting samples, because sometimes you might want to use a high number for path trace samples per pixel to reduce noise in your image, and then sometimes you want to use a lot of subframes per frame just to clear up a lot of the motion blur samples. So just something to note. But right now we don't really have too much motion blur in it, so I can just put 1 and then just keep it at that. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. Like, this is for setting up keys and all that, but I'm not going to jump into any of that right now. This is your output path. So what you would do is set up your output path to wherever you want it to render to. This is the name of the file that will be in that output path. So if you want to name it, I don't know, whatever you want, you can do that here. This is just your frames. You can change from JPEG or whatever other format you want to render out to. Save alpha, this is if you're rendering and you want, let's just say we wanted Lego Jensen to be cut out of this and we had nothing in the background, no HDRI, no backdrop or anything, then you would have an alpha of the objects in this scene. Override existing frames is enabled so that when you do render, you can allow it to render override frames that's already existing in your path. If not, you just leave that as it is and it'll be fine. So from there, you want to just click capture sequence and then render your sequence. So here we are at the end of our tutorial, and as you can see, the frames have been rendered out. Everything is looking clean as expected. I hope you learned something from the class, and thanks for viewing. I can't wait to see what you all create.